"Yes, that's my maid," the husband said, embarrassed by his wife. She asks for a divorce, but years later, the husband regrets it. In a house marked by the passage of time and the wear of the years lived Rita, a young woman whose entire existence had been shaped by the rigid rules of an extremely conservative family. The walls of the house seemed to echo with the strict values and expectations that had governed her upbringing, confining her to a narrow path of what was considered acceptable for a woman. From an early age, Rita understood that in her world, being a woman meant living in the shadows. She was expected to remain silent, obedient, and invisible, while her younger brother was always the center of attention. He received praise, affection, and all the privileges that came with being the male heir in a household that valued tradition above all else. Rita, on the other hand, rarely received smiles or compliments. Her achievements, no matter how small or personal, went unnoticed. Her days were filled with endless chores and lessons on how to be the perfect wife and mother, roles that her parents believed were the only meaningful pursuits for a woman. She was taught to sew, cook, and clean with precision, but was never encouraged to read or question the world around her. The few times she tried to express herself or share her thoughts, she was met with silence or disapproval. Despite this, Rita's spirit remained quietly rebellious. She longed for more than the life that had been prescribed for her. In the rare moments she had to herself, she would sneak away to a small park near her home, where she had discovered a hidden world of books. Abandoned by others, these books became her sanctuary, offering her a glimpse into lives far removed from her own. Lives where women were not only seen but heard, where they could be scientists, writers, or leaders. The words on the pages filled her with a sense of hope, a belief that her life could be different, even if she didn't yet know how to break free from the constraints that bound her. As she grew older, the weight of her family's expectations pressed down on her more heavily. Her parents began to discuss potential suitors, making it clear that they saw her future only in terms of marriage and domestic life. For them, the idea of Rita having a career, furthering her education, or living independently was unthinkable. Her mother often reminded her, "A woman's place is in the home, Rita. Your brother will carry on the family name, and you will support your future husband." Rita felt trapped, her dreams suffocating beneath the demands of a life she didn't want. She would often watch her brother, carefree and full of possibilities, while she felt as though her life had already been decided without her consent. The unfairness of it gnawed at her, but she buried her frustration deep within, knowing that outward defiance would only lead to more restrictions. Then, on the day she turned 18, something shifted inside her. The realization that she could no longer live according to her family's rules, that she had to take control of her own destiny, struck her like a bolt of lightning. For years, she had quietly dreamed of freedom, but now the dream felt urgent, necessary. She couldn't spend the rest of her life confined to a role she hadn't chosen. With only a few savings hidden away in an old tea tin and a small bag of clothes, Rita made the decision to leave. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Breaking away from the only life she had ever known would come with its own challenges, but the fear of the unknown paled in comparison to the fear of staying. She couldn't bear the thought of waking up one day as a woman who had lost her chance at independence, swallowed by a life that wasn't hers. That evening, as her family gathered for dinner, Rita looked around the room one last time. The familiar walls, the heavy furniture, her parents seated in their usual places, her brother laughing freely. This was the life they had chosen for her, but it was not the life she wanted. She didn't say goodbye. She couldn't. Instead, she slipped quietly out the door, leaving behind the house that had shaped her but no longer had power over her. The night air felt like liberation, cool against her skin as she walked toward the city, toward a future she would carve out for herself. As she stepped into the unknown, Rita felt a surge of determination. She was no longer bound by the rules that had defined her for so long. Now, she would define herself. And with that thought, she moved forward into a new chapter of her life. one where she would no longer be invisible, no longer held back by the limitations of others. This was the beginning of her story, and for the first time, it was hers to write. Despite this environment, Rita found solace and escape. In the books she discovered abandoned in the park near her school. The oppressive atmosphere of her home and the weight of expectations seemed to fade when she found herself surrounded by pages filled with stories and knowledge. Every day after school, she would sneak away to a hidden spot beneath the large knotted tree at the park, where the thick branches provided shade and a sense of safety. It was here, in the quiet, where she secretly taught herself to read. At first, it was slow. She struggled to piece together the letters, remembering only fragments of the brief lessons she had overheard from her brother's studies. But as days turned into weeks, the shapes and sounds began to make sense, unlocking the printed words before her eyes. The world in those books opened wide, offering her a glimpse of possibilities she had never imagined. In those pages, she traveled to far-off lands, learned about the bravery of historical figures, and marveled at the scientific discoveries that had changed the world. What fascinated her most were the women in these stories. In her own life, the roles for women seemed predetermined: caretakers, homemakers, silent figures in the background. But in the pages of the books she read, women were heroines, scientists, explorers, and leaders. They defied the constraints of society, proving their worth not only through beauty or obedience, but through intelligence, courage, and perseverance. These women became Rita's secret idols, fueling her desire to be something more than what her family expected of her. With each book, Rita's world grew. She learned about the galaxies, the oceans, and the mysteries of science. She became obsessed with the idea that knowledge could be a key to freedom. Freedom from the small world of her home and the strict expectations placed on her. The more she read, the more her own ambitions started to take shape, even if she wasn't sure how she would achieve them. She began to dream of a life beyond the boundaries of her small town, where she could pursue an education, a career, and the independence she craved. But these dreams came with a cost. The more time she spent with her books, the more distant she felt from her family. Her mother, focused on maintaining the household, saw Rita's secret reading as rebellion. She often scolded her daughter for wasting time instead of helping with chores. Her brother, the favored child, didn't understand Rita's longing for something more, and her father remained silent, his disapproval shown only through disapproving looks. Rita knew she couldn't openly share her dreams with them. To do so would risk confrontation, and more than anything, Rita feared being trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. So she continued her secret education, filling her mind with ideas and possibilities, clinging to the hope that one day she would find a way to escape and live the life she imagined in the pages of those books. But as her knowledge grew, so did the tension at home. Rita's newfound confidence in her own intelligence and potential began to clash with the rigid, traditional values of her parents. Her mother sensed the change in her daughter and grew more controlling, demanding more of Rita's time and attention. Arguments became more frequent, and Rita's stolen moments under the tree felt like her only refuge. Still, she persevered. She knew that her path wouldn't be easy, but the stories she read had taught her that true change and freedom often came at a cost. She would have to find her own way, just like the women she admired. And so, Rita kept reading, kept dreaming, knowing that one day she too would be the heroine of her own story. One day, after a particularly intense argument where her father once again reaffirmed his belief that women didn't need an education beyond learning how to take care of a home, Rita made a decision. At 18, with only a small amount of savings hidden in an old tea tin and a backpack full of clothes, she decided to leave behind her life of restrictions. Her father's voice still echoed in her mind, each word laced with the same rigid conviction he had carried all her life. "You don't need school, Rita. What good is it to know algebra when you can't cook a decent meal?" His words had become a wall that seemed to box her in, and every time she pushed back, the walls closed in tighter. For years, Rita had quietly disagreed, her mind filled with books she read in secret and dreams of exploring a world far beyond the small rural town where she'd been raised. She knew she was capable of more than the future her father had in mind, a future of marriage, children, and endless chores. But that day, something shifted inside her. She no longer wanted to live in a house where her dreams were treated like childish fantasies. It was time to break free. As the house settled into its usual nighttime quiet, she slipped into her room and began packing the essentials. A few changes of clothes, her favorite worn novel, and the small tin that held all her savings from occasional odd jobs. She didn't have much, but she had enough to get started. Her hands trembled slightly as she zipped up her backpack, but her heart was steady. There was no turning back. Rita crept down the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky floorboards she had memorized over the years. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows, but she moved silently, her senses alert to the sound of any movement that might signal her parents waking up. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in her mind. What if she was making a mistake? What if her father had been right all along, and she wasn't cut out for the world beyond this house? But as quickly as the thought came, Rita brushed it away. There was no room for hesitation. She was choosing her own path now. When she reached the front door, she paused, taking one last look at the house she had grown up in. The familiar surroundings, once comforting, now felt like a prison she was finally escaping. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. With one hand on the doorknob, she turned it slowly and stepped out into the cool night air. The road stretched out before her, dark and unfamiliar, but Rita felt an exhilarating sense of freedom. For the first time in her life, she was in control. She wasn't sure where she was headed. Perhaps the nearby city, where she could blend into the bustling streets and find work. Or maybe she'd go farther, find a place where she could study, learn, and prove to herself that her ambitions were worth pursuing. As she walked, the stars above seemed brighter, as if they too were marking this new chapter in her life. Rita had no grand illusions that it would be easy. There would be challenges, moments of loneliness and doubt, but she was ready to face them. She had spent too many years being told who she should be, and now she was finally going to decide that for herself. With each step, the weight of her father's words seemed to lift. Rita knew she had just embarked on a journey that would shape the rest of her life. The unknown was daunting, but the possibilities were endless. For the first time, Rita allowed herself to dream without limits, her heart full of hope and determination. And so, with nothing but a backpack and a fierce desire for freedom, Rita walked toward a future she was determined to create on her own terms. Before leaving, she took one last look at the house where she had grown up, sighing with a bittersweet feeling. She wasn't just leaving her home behind, but also the image of who she was expected to be. The weight of her family's expectations, of the life they had planned for her, was slowly slipping away. Now, she was stepping into the unknown, both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect of starting over. Rita arrived in the city with her heart pounding, a complex mix of fear and excitement swirling inside her. The tall buildings and crowded streets were so different from the quiet familiarity of her hometown, but she welcomed the change. It was here, in this bustling environment, that she hoped to carve out a new life for herself, one where she could define her own path. Her eyes fell on a small clothing store in the city center with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. It felt like fate. Maybe this was her opportunity, the first step toward independence. With her hair tied back and a nervous smile, she took a deep breath and stepped into the store. Inside, the scent of fabric and perfume surrounded her, and for a brief moment, she felt a wave of uncertainty. Would they even consider hiring someone with so little experience? Shaking off her doubts, she approached the counter and asked to speak with the manager. Carlos, the owner's son, emerged from the back. He was a young man with a kind appearance, his brown eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. His manner was courteous as he listened to her request, nodding as she explained her need for work. Rita spoke with a quiet intensity, her voice carrying a weight of determination that belied her nervousness. She needed this job not just to survive, but to reclaim her sense of purpose. Carlos noticed this. He wasn't just impressed by her courage, but also moved by the sincerity in her words. He had seen plenty of people come and go from the store, but there was something about Rita, something resilient. His family had always valued hard work and perseverance, and in her, he saw both. "Tell me," he began, leaning against the counter, "what experience do you have in retail?" Rita hesitated for a moment. "Not much," she admitted honestly, "but I'm a fast learner and I'm willing to put in the effort. I need this opportunity to prove myself." There was something refreshing about her straightforwardness, and Carlos couldn't help but smile. "You know, most people come in here pretending they know everything, even when they don't. It's rare to meet someone who's honest about their limitations." Rita smiled shyly, grateful for his understanding. Carlos paused for a moment, thinking. His family's store could use someone with her level of determination and willingness to learn. "All right, let's give it a try," he said. "We'll start with a trial period. If things go well, we'll make it permanent." Rita's heart leaped with joy and relief. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As the days passed, Rita threw herself into her new job. She was on her feet for long hours, organizing displays, assisting customers, and learning the ropes of retail. It was hard work, but she didn't mind. Every task felt like a step toward reclaiming her sense of independence. Slowly, she began to feel more confident, not only in her work, but in herself. The store became her haven, a place where she could prove her worth. Carlos, too, noticed her dedication. He would often stop to observe her as she helped customers, impressed by how quickly she had adapted. Over time, their interactions became more frequent and more personal. He began to admire her, not only for her work ethic, but also for her resilience, her ability to face adversity with grace. They started having small conversations at the end of the day, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. Rita found herself opening up to Carlos in a way she hadn't expected. He was kind and attentive, and slowly a bond began to form between them. For Rita, Carlos represented more than just a friendly face. He became a symbol of her new beginning, someone who saw her not as the person she was expected to be, but as the person she was becoming. Before leaving, she took one last look at the house where she had grown up, sighing with a bittersweet feeling. She wasn't just leaving her home behind, but also the image of who she was expected to be. The weight of her family's expectations, of the life they had planned for her, was slowly slipping away. Now, she was stepping into the unknown, both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect of starting over. Rita arrived in the city with her heart pounding, a complex mix of fear and excitement swirling inside her. The tall buildings and crowded streets were so different from the quiet familiarity of her hometown. But she welcomed the change. It was here, in this bustling environment, that she hoped to carve out a new life for herself, one where she could define her own path. Her eyes fell on a small clothing store in the city center with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. It felt like fate. Maybe this was her opportunity, the first step toward independence. With her hair tied back and a nervous smile, she took a deep breath and stepped into the store. Inside, the scent of fabric and perfume surrounded her, and for a brief moment, she felt a wave of uncertainty. Would they even consider hiring someone with so little experience? Shaking off her doubts, she approached the counter and asked to speak with the manager. Carlos, the owner's son, emerged from the back. He was a young man with a kind appearance, his brown eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. His manner was courteous as he listened to her request, nodding as she explained her need for work. Rita spoke with a quiet intensity, her voice carrying a weight of determination that belied her nervousness. She needed this job not just to survive, but to reclaim her sense of purpose. Carlos noticed this. He wasn't just impressed by her courage, but also moved by the sincerity in her words. He had seen plenty of people come and go from the store, but there was something about Rita, something resilient. His family had always valued hard work and perseverance, and in her, he saw both. "Tell me," he began, leaning against the counter, "what experience do you have in retail?" Rita hesitated for a moment. "Not much," she admitted honestly, "but I'm a fast learner, and I'm willing to put in the effort. I need this opportunity to prove myself." There was something refreshing about her straightforwardness, and Carlos couldn't help but smile. "You know, most people come in here pretending they know everything, even when they don't. It's rare to meet someone who's honest about their limitations." Rita smiled shyly, grateful for his understanding. Carlos paused for a moment, thinking. His family's store could use someone with her level of determination and willingness to learn. "All right, let's give it a try," he said. "We'll start with a trial period. If things go well, we'll make it permanent." Rita's heart leaped with joy and relief. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As the days passed, Rita threw herself into her new job. She was on her feet for long hours, organizing displays, assisting customers, and learning the ropes of retail. It was hard work, but she didn't mind. Every task felt like a step toward reclaiming her sense of independence. Slowly, she began to feel more confident, not only in her work, but in herself. The store became her haven, a place where she could prove her worth. Carlos, too, noticed her dedication. He would often stop to observe her as she helped customers, impressed by how quickly she had adapted. Over time, their interactions became more frequent and more personal. He began to admire her, not only for her work ethic, but also for her resilience, her ability to face adversity with grace. They started having small conversations at the end of the day, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. Rita found herself opening up to Carlos in a way she hadn't expected. He was kind and attentive, and slowly, a bond began to form between them. For Rita, Carlos represented more than just a friendly face. He became a symbol of her new beginning, someone who saw her not as the person she was expected to be, but as the person she was becoming. Before leaving, she took one last look at the house where she had grown up, sighing with a bittersweet feeling. She wasn't just leaving her home behind, but also the image of who she was expected to be. The weight of her family's expectations, of the life they had planned for her, was slowly slipping away. Now, she was stepping into the unknown, both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect of starting over. Rita arrived in the city with her heart pounding, a complex mix of fear and excitement swirling inside her. The tall buildings and crowded streets were so different from the quiet familiarity of her hometown, but she welcomed the change. It was here, in this bustling environment, that she hoped to carve out a new life for herself, one where she could define her own path. Her eyes fell on a small clothing store in the city center, with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. It felt like fate. Maybe this was her opportunity, the first step toward independence. With her hair tied back and a nervous smile, she took a deep breath and stepped into the store. Inside, the scent of fabric and perfume surrounded her, and for a brief moment, she felt a wave of uncertainty. Would they even consider hiring someone with so little experience? Shaking off her doubts, she approached the counter and asked to speak with the manager. Carlos, the owner's son, emerged from the back. He was a young man with a kind appearance, his brown eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. His manner was courteous as he listened to her request, nodding as she explained her need for work. Rita spoke with a quiet intensity, her voice carrying a weight of determination that belied her nervousness. She needed this job not just to survive, but to reclaim her sense of purpose. Carlos noticed this. He wasn't just impressed by her courage, but also moved by the sincerity in her words. He had seen plenty of people come and go from the store, but there was something about Rita, something resilient. His family had always valued hard work and perseverance, and in her, he saw both. "Tell me," he began, leaning against the counter, "what experience do you have in retail?" Rita hesitated for a moment. "Not much," she admitted honestly, but I'm a fast learner, and I'm willing to put in the effort. I need this opportunity to prove myself." There was something refreshing about her straightforwardness, and Carlos couldn't help but smile. You know, most people come in here pretending they know everything, even when they don't. It's rare to meet someone who's honest about their limitations. Rita smiled shyly, grateful for his understanding. Carlos paused for a moment, thinking. His family's store could use someone with her level of determination and willingness to learn. "All right, let's give it a try," he said. "We'll start with a trial period. If things go well, we'll make it permanent." Rita's heart leaped with joy and relief. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As the days passed, Rita threw herself into her new job. She was on her feet for long hours, organizing displays, assisting customers, and learning the ropes of retail. It was hard work, but she didn't mind. Every task felt like a step toward reclaiming her sense of independence. Slowly, she began to feel more confident, not only in her work, but in herself. The store became her haven, a place where she could prove her worth. Carlos, too, noticed her dedication. He would often stop to observe her as she helped customers, impressed by how quickly she had adapted. Over time, their interactions became more frequent and more personal. He began to admire her not only for her work ethic, but also for her resilience, her ability to face adversity with grace. They started having small conversations at the end of the day, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. Rita found herself opening up to Carlos in a way she hadn't expected. He was kind and attentive, and slowly, a bond began to form between them. For Rita, Carlos represented more than just a friendly face. He became a symbol of her new beginning, someone who saw her not as the person she was expected to be, but as the person she was becoming. Thus began a new chapter in Rita's life, filled with challenges, but also new hopes. Working in the store, she quickly learned the necessary tasks and proved to be a dedicated and meticulous employee. Carlos often watched her from a distance, admiring not only her ability to learn, but also the strength that emanated from her. With each passing day, the mutual respect between Rita and Carlos grew, planting the seeds of a friendship that soon began to blossom into something more. However, Rita kept the truth about her past a secret, fearing that if it were discovered, everything she had built could crumble. As the sun began to set on the city's horizon, Rita found herself increasingly absorbed by the whirlwind of her new surroundings. The first days at the clothing store were a whirlwind of learning and adaptation. Carlos was patient and encouraging, teaching her how to manage inventory, serve customers, and even decorate the store's windows. Something Rita found particularly fascinating: the kind and respectful treatment that Carlos offered her. It was a striking contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of her home. Gradually, Rita began to feel more comfortable, not only at her job, but also in her own skin. However, with the security and confidence also came memories of her family and the life she had left behind. She often found herself staring out of the store window, lost in thoughts about her mother and brother, wondering if they would ever understand why she had left. One afternoon, while organizing some newly arrived blouses, Carlos approached with 2 cups of coffee. The conversation flowed naturally between them, and for the moment, Rita forgot all her worries. Carlos shared stories from his own life, talking about his college days and his travels abroad, things that seemed like another world to Rita. But most importantly, he spoke about his dream of taking on more responsibilities at the store and eventually designing his own clothing line. Inspired by Carlos's passion and warmed by the friendship growing between them, Rita began to share details of her own life, although she still kept the full truth about her escape to herself. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing day, and without realizing it, Rita began to develop deeper feelings for Carlos. It was during a late-night closing when their relationship took an unexpected turn. While doing inventory, soft music began to play on the storeroom radio. On impulse, Carlos extended his hand to Rita, inviting her to dance. At first, she hesitated, surprised by the gesture, but Carlos's sincere smile reassured her. They danced between the shadows of the store, and in that moment, Rita felt a happiness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Over time, their love grew, as furtive and deep as the roots of a tree, a love born not only from affection, but also from mutual respect and care. Knowing their relationship could bring complications, they decided to keep it a secret, at least for a while, until they could plan a future together. One night, while walking home under a starry sky, Carlos took Rita's hand and, with a voice trembling with emotion, proposed to her. He didn't have a ring or grand gestures, just sincere words and a promise of love and support. Rita, with tears of joy in her eyes, accepted. She knew the path wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that together they could face any challenge life threw at them. The secret engagement between Rita and Carlos filled their days with a new light and hope. Determined to keep their relationship a secret until they found the right moment to reveal it, they continued working together at the store, but now with renewed complicity and tenderness. Every shared glance and smile was a testament to their growing love and the shared dream of a future together. Motivated by his commitment to Rita, Carlos began working on his project of designing his own clothing line. He spent entire nights drawing and redrawing models, while Rita sat by his side, learning and contributing ideas. The store became a small refuge where they could be themselves, away from curious glances and social judgments. However, as the months passed, Rita began to feel the weight of keeping such a big secret. Although she trusted Carlos deeply, the worry that her family might discover the truth about her escape and current life started to erode her peace. In sleepless nights, she reflected on the consequences of being found out and her parents' possible reactions. Despite these concerns, Carlos's love and support gave her the strength to face her fears. One afternoon, while reorganizing the store's back room, Rita decided to open her heart to Carlos about her worries. She told him more details about her family, the strictness of her upbringing, and how her brother was the only one who had received love and opportunities. Carlos listened attentively, holding her hand and reaffirming his commitment and protection. Together, they decided it was time to start planning their wedding, even if it had to be a small, secret ceremony without their families present. With Carlos's support, Rita also started attending night classes to finish her high school diploma, something she had left incomplete due to her family's restrictions. It was important for her to gain additional independence and security, especially if things became complicated with her past. Carlos supported her unconditionally, proud of her determination and strength. The day of their wedding arrived like a dream. They arranged a small ceremony in a local garden, with only the pastor and a few strangers as witnesses. The air was scented with the fragrance of flowers and the soft songs of birds. Rita wore a simple white dress that she had altered herself, and Carlos wore an elegant but understated suit. They exchanged vows at sunset, promising to be there for each other in sickness and health, in wealth and poverty. After the ceremony, they walked together through streets illuminated by stars, discussing all their plans and dreams for the future. They felt invincible, united not only by love, but also by the strength to overcome any obstacles life might present. The secret happiness of Rita and Carlos continued to flourish in the shadow of their small wedding. Time seemed to have created a bubble around them, where, for a moment, the rest of the world couldn't touch them. But like all secrets kept in the depths of shadows, theirs was destined to come to light. It was an apparently ordinary day at the store. Rita, with a smile on her face, was attending to customers, while Carlos was checking the new stock. The doorbell rang, and both looked up, expecting to see another customer. However, standing at the entrance was Carlos's father, a man of imposing presence and a severe gaze who rarely visited the store without a purpose. The air immediately grew tense. Carlos's father looked from Rita to Carlos, his expression hardening as he saw their hands briefly touch across the counter. Rita felt a chill of fear, recalling all the times she had imagined this moment and hoped it would never come. Carlos, I need to speak with you. Now, his father said in a voice that allowed no argument. Carlos nodded, casting an apologetic glance at Rita before following his father to the office in the back. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Rita waited, serving customers automatically, her mind spinning with what might be happening behind the closed door. When Carlos finally returned, his face was pale and his eyes troubled. "Rita, we need to talk," murmured Carlos, leading her to a quiet corner of the store. "My father, he knows about us, about the wedding. I don't know how, but he knows." Rita's world wavered. "What are we going to do?" she asked in a whisper. Carlos held her hands, searching her eyes. "He wants me to end things with you. He says if I don't, he'll cut me off from the business and make sure I don't get work anywhere else. He gave me until tomorrow to decide." Tears filled Rita's eyes, but she held them back. She couldn't believe the man she loved was being forced to choose between her and his future. What hurt the most, though, was the fear in Carlos's eyes. The fear that told her he might give in to his father's demands. That night, Rita didn't sleep. She tossed and turned, every dark thought a blow against the fragile hope she had built with Carlos. At dawn, she made a decision. She couldn't let Carlos ruin his life for her. To love him meant to free him, even if it broke her own heart. The next day, before Carlos arrived at the store, Rita gathered her few belongings and wrote a note for Carlos. In it, she explained that she was releasing him from his promise, that she would leave so he could have the life his father wanted for him. With tears streaming down her face, she left the note in the place where they used to share their coffee breaks and walked out of the store, not without casting one last glance at the small world she had shared with Carlos. Rita wandered aimlessly through the city streets, each step taking her farther from Carlos's store and the shared dream that had evaporated into the cold morning air. As she walked, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carlos. With trembling hands, Rita opened the text. "Rita, I need to see you. Please don't make any decisions until we talk. I'll be waiting for you at our park. Carlos." Rita's heart raced. Could there still be hope? With a mix of fear and longing, she headed to the small park where they had shared so many happy moments. Carlos was there, waiting for her under the old oak tree. When she saw him, a lump formed in her throat. Carlos quickly approached, holding her hands. "I read your note," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "But you can't decide this for both of us. I'm not letting you go. Not like this. My father may try to control my life, but he won't control my heart." Rita looked at Carlos, seeing in his eyes a determination that had seemed impossible the night before. "Carlos, what are we going to do? Your father is capable of—" "I know," Carlos interrupted. "But I've thought about it all night. We can start over, somewhere else. Far from here, far from my father and everything trying to separate us." The idea of running away again, this time with Carlos, was terrifying, but also deeply liberating. "Are you sure?" Rita asked, the hope starting to replace the fear in her voice. "I'm sure," Carlos affirmed. "I love you, Rita, and we'll get through this together." The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. Carlos and Rita pooled their savings, packed their most essential belongings, and searched for a place to start anew. They chose a small coastal town where Carlos's father would have no influence. Carlos had made a few contacts there during his college days, which could help them get established. Finally, the day of departure arrived. With their few belongings and many dreams, they boarded a train at dawn, leaving behind the city that had been the backdrop to their love and also their greatest challenges. In the new town, they found a small apartment, and Carlos secured a job at a local clothing store. With her previous experience, Rita soon joined him, working side by side to rebuild their lives. It was a humble beginning, but free from the shadows of the past. The first 2 months in the new town were a mixture of hope and hard work for Rita and Carlos. Though they enjoyed the freedom and peace their new life provided, the shadows of the past soon began to make themselves felt, especially in Carlos's mind. Working at the small local clothing store, Carlos often encountered old college friends who had gone on to more prestigious paths. Though he initially felt happy to share his new life and marriage with Rita, he gradually began to notice a change in their attitudes, their glances, their half-hidden smiles, and their veiled comments about how he had ended up in a small store with a wife who didn't have a well-known last name. These subtle judgments began to weigh on him deeply. Rita, for her part, noticed the change in Carlos, but attributed it to the stress of work and adapting to a new place. However, one afternoon, after the store had closed, Carlos exploded in a way Rita had never seen before. "Don't you see how they look at us, Rita? Like we're beneath them, like I've failed just for being here with you," Carlos said, his voice full of frustration. And something else, something Rita couldn't immediately identify. Rita stood there, hurt by Carlos's words. "Carlos, what are you saying? We love each other. We decided together to come here, to be together, away from your father's influence. I know, and I love you, Rita, but it's hard. Every day is a struggle, and I feel like I gave up everything I could have been for this," Carlos responded, gesturing to the modest store they had begun to call their own. Carlos's resentment grew over time, fed by comparisons to his old friends, and the pressure of not meeting the standards of success he had set for himself. Rita did her best to support him, but the emotional distance between them began to grow. Carlos became more reserved, and their moments of joy grew rarer. One day, while Rita was organizing a promotional event at the store, Carlos returned from a meeting with an old friend feeling upset. At first, he avoided talking about it, but after Rita's insistence, he revealed the true source of his torment. "My friend asked if you were hired as a housekeeper when he saw us working together," Carlos confessed, avoiding Rita's gaze. "And I didn't correct him. Rita, I don't know why, but I didn't correct him." Rita's heart sank. The pain from that confession hit her with a force she didn't expect. Carlos, seeing the wound he had inflicted, tried to apologize, but the words felt empty. In the days that followed, the atmosphere between Rita and Carlos grew tense and cold. Despite Carlos's apologies, something had broken between them. Rita felt a mixture of sadness and disappointment, struggling to understand how the man who had once defied his own father for love could now feel ashamed of her presence. As for Carlos, he was immersed in his own internal battle, grappling with the shame of his actions and his inability to reconcile his personal ambitions with the reality of his life. One night, while they ate dinner in silence, Carlos broke the tense quiet with news that left Rita speechless. "Rita, I've been thinking a lot, and I think we should separate. There are things I need to understand about who I am and what I want in life, and I think you'd be better off without me," Carlos said, avoiding looking directly into Rita's eyes. Rita felt as if the air had been knocked out of her lungs. "Separate? Carlos, everything we've been through together means nothing? Our love, our commitment to support each other?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Carlos sighed, a mix of relief and pain crossing his face. "I love you, Rita, but not in the way you deserve. And there's something else. I met someone else. Someone who's been there for me in ways I can't explain." The words were like daggers to Rita. Not only had her husband publicly humiliated her, but he had also betrayed her. Despite the overwhelming pain, Rita found the strength to respond. "If that's what you want, I won't be the one to stop you. But don't think I'll disappear from your life so easily, especially if this affects our business and the house we built together." Carlos nodded, resigned. "I understand, and I'll respect whatever decision you make regarding those matters." The following week unfolded in a whirlwind of emotions and decisions for Rita. Devastated but determined, she began sorting out her legal and financial affairs. Meanwhile, Carlos quickly moved on with his new relationship, introducing his lover, who, to Rita's greater shock and pain, was pregnant. The final confrontation came when Carlos, supported by his new partner, demanded a divorce and the sale of the store. Heartbroken but indomitable in spirit, Rita faced Carlos with dignity. I won't let you ruin what I've worked so hard to build, Carlos. I'll fight for my share, and I won't give up easily, Rita declared, her voice steady and clear. In the weeks following Carlos's shocking revelation, Rita found herself navigating a sea of tumultuous emotions. Although the pain of betrayal and abandonment threatened to overwhelm her, her survival instinct and determination to maintain her dignity drove her to make decisive decisions. First, Rita consulted a divorce lawyer to understand and secure her rights in the separation. The shop premises, jointly acquired during the marriage, had become a significant point of contention. Carlos, driven by his new partner, was eager to settle everything and start over. However, Rita was determined not to be sidelined, either financially or in terms of her legal rights. Rita, based on the documents and the story you've told me, you have a strong case to retain your share of the business property, her lawyer explained during one of their sessions. Additionally, since you've contributed equally, if not more, to the store's success since you moved here, this strengthens your position. Armed with this information and renewed self-confidence, Rita confronted Carlos during a meeting mediated by their lawyers. Sitting across from the man with whom she had shared so many dreams and challenges, she felt a strange mix of pity and strength. Carlos, I never wanted our matters to reach a lawyer's office. However, I cannot allow your new life to destroy what I've built, what belongs to me. I will fight for the store and for what is fair, Rita stated calmly but firmly. Carlos, visibly uncomfortable and torn between his emotions and the pressures of his new relationship, felt resigned. I understand, Rita, and I'm sorry things have reached this point. It wasn't my intention to hurt you. With the legal process underway, Rita also had to face the change in the community's perception. News of the divorce and the circumstances surrounding it spread, and while some looked at her with disdain, many others came forward to offer support and respect for how she was handling the situation. This support network became a source of comfort and strength for Rita. Amidst this turmoil, Rita made an effort to maintain normalcy in the daily operation of the store, channeling her pain into passion for the work, ensuring that the store not only survived but thrived. Her efforts did not go unnoticed, and the shop began to attract more customers, impressed by her dedication and the charm of the establishment. As Rita navigated the turbulent waters of divorce and the battle for the store, she found unexpected and strong support in her son, Gustavo. Despite his youth, Gustavo had developed heightened sensitivity due to the conflicts he had witnessed at home. He had noticed the tension between his parents, and although he did not fully understand the complexities of adult emotions and decisions, he knew his mother was suffering. One afternoon after school, Gustavo approached Rita while she was reviewing some papers related to the store. With the innocence and sincerity that only a child can possess, he placed his small hand over hers and said, "Mom, are you sad because of Dad?" Moved by her son's perception, Rita decided to be honest, adapting her response to something a child could understand. "A little, Gustavo, but sometimes even adults have to make tough decisions to be happy. It's like when you decide not to play with someone who isn't kind to you, remember?" Gustavo nodded, and with the seriousness of a miniature adult, he added, "I want you to be happy, Mom, and I'm going to help you." Gustavo's words strengthened Rita more than he could ever imagine. They were a reminder that she was not alone, and that, despite everything, there was something beautiful and pure in her life worth fighting for. In the days that followed, Gustavo became Rita's shadow, helping wherever he could, whether spending time at the store after school or simply being silent company while she worked at home. His presence was a balm for Rita, and his help, though small, reminded her of the importance of her fight. The situation reached a critical point when Carlos's father, Gustavo's grandfather, attempted to intervene. He arrived at the store one day, demanding to speak with Rita under the pretense of easing tensions. However, his true intention was to persuade Rita to give up her share of the store to Carlos, arguing that it would be better for everyone. Prepared and resolute, Rita refused to be intimidated. "I've worked just as hard as Carlos here, maybe even harder. Besides, Gustavo and I depend on this business. I won't give it up just because that's what you want." The grandfather, unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by a woman he considered inferior, was about to retort when Gustavo intervened with the courage only children have. He stood in front of his grandfather and said, "You shouldn't make my mom feel bad. She's the best and she's doing everything for us." Surprised by Gustavo's intervention and confronted with Rita's firmness, the grandfather withdrew, though not without casting a look that promised the dispute was not entirely over. After the resolution of the legal dispute with Carlos and his father, Rita found herself at a crossroads. Although she had managed to keep her share of the store, the emotional strain of the past few months had taken its toll. The store, though still profitable, constantly reminded her of her past with Carlos and the painful events that followed. After much reflection, Rita decided to sell her stake in the store and seek a fresh start in another field that could offer her peace and distance from her former life. Encouraged by a friend, Rita decided to explore an opportunity in property management, starting as a housekeeper for a demanding client recommended by an employment agency. The client, Felipe, was an elderly widower who lived in a large, beautiful house that required meticulous attention, something Rita found to be a fitting challenge and a welcome distraction. On her first day at Felipe's house, Rita felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of her new responsibility. The house was filled with antiques and artwork, and each room had its own story and character. Felipe, a man of few words, showed her the house, pointing out areas of particular interest and his expectations for cleanliness and organization. Despite her initial nerves, Rita embraced her new role with dedication, often working long hours to ensure everything was perfect. Her attention to detail didn't go unnoticed, and Felipe, though reserved, began to show his appreciation through small gestures like leaving thank you notes or recommending her to his acquaintances. Gustavo, on the other hand, found a new world to explore in Felipe's house. He often accompanied his mother after school, and Felipe, who had grown fond of the boy, allowed him to use the library. There, Gustavo developed a love for reading and learning. Over time, Rita began to feel that she had made the right choice. The stability and tranquility of her new job allowed her to heal and reflect on her life, while also giving her the space to plan for the future, especially regarding Gustavo's education and well-being. One day, while preparing one of the guest rooms for an important visit from one of Felipe's old friends, Rita found an old photo album. With Felipe's permission, they flipped through the album together, and he began sharing stories of his youth and his late wife, revealing a more personal and emotional side. This human connection added a new dimension to their professional relationship, gradually transforming it into a respectful friendship. Rita continued to establish herself in her new role with Felipe, demonstrating a remarkable ability to manage the household tasks with an expert eye for detail. Her days became filled with the routine of meticulous cleaning, organizing, and occasionally preparing small events for Felipe and his friends. As Rita became more familiar with every corner of the vast house, she also grew accustomed to Felipe's quirks and expectations, and he, in turn, grew in his appreciation for her. Felipe, a man of few words and many memories, had begun to open up more to Rita. During their coffee breaks, he shared stories of his travels and of his late wife, a woman who had clearly left an indelible mark on his heart. Rita listened attentively, finding in these stories life lessons and inspiration. This emotional connection inadvertently led Felipe to trust Rita more, not just as an employee, but as a comforting presence in his home. One afternoon, Felipe asked Rita to take on a more active role in managing the household, expanding her responsibilities to include supervising other staff and managing Felipe's personal schedule. "I trust your judgment and dedication," Felipe said, handing her the keys to his personal office, a space that had previously been off-limits to her. Gratified by the trust Felipe had placed in her, Rita embraced her new responsibilities with renewed vigor. However, this expansion of her duties also meant less time at home, which affected the time she spent with Gustavo. Conscious of this challenge, Rita made every effort to balance her time, ensuring that her relationship with her son remained strong and close. Gustavo, for his part, had not only grown in stature, but also in maturity. He saw his mother not just as a source of love, but as an example of strength and perseverance. The afternoons they spent together, though less frequent, became more meaningful. Rita used these moments to teach Gustavo about responsibility, work ethic, and the importance of cultivating relationships. The stability they found in Felipe's house was complemented by Rita's growing self-confidence. She began to consider options to continue her education, exploring online courses in business management and hospitality, with the aim of strengthening her ability to handle her growing responsibilities. As Rita integrated more into Felipe's life and routine, their relationship deepened, evolving into a friendship built on mutual respect and trust. Felipe, who had spent much of his life surrounded by employees he viewed as superficial, found in Rita a genuine and comforting presence. One cold autumn afternoon, Felipe fell ill with the flu, confining him to bed. Despite having a medical team available to care for him, it was Rita who took on the responsibility of ensuring he received proper meals and medication at the right times. Her efficiency and care made Felipe deeply grateful and more dependent on her than ever. During the days of Felipe's illness, Rita spent long hours by his side, not only tending to his physical needs, but also offering companionship. Between cups of tea and bowls of soup, Felipe shared stories of his youth, anecdotes from his travels, and lessons he had learned over the years. Rita, in turn, found these moments enlightening and felt increasingly connected to the elderly man. As Felipe regained his health, he expressed his gratitude to Rita in more tangible ways. One day, he presented her with a small box as a token of his appreciation. Inside, Rita found a beautiful antique brooch that had belonged to Felipe's late wife. "She would have wanted you to have it," Felipe said, his voice heavy with emotion, "for taking care of an old grump like me." Rita was deeply moved by the gesture. The brooch, a delicate piece of silver filigree with a small emerald at its center, was clearly an item of great sentimental value. Accepting such a personal gift was another step in deepening their relationship, a sign of the trust and mutual respect they had cultivated. This episode marked a turning point in how Rita viewed her work. It was no longer just a source of income or an escape from her past, but an opportunity to make a meaningful difference in someone's life. She felt that her presence in Felipe's house had a greater purpose, and this gave her a new sense of satisfaction and pride in her work. Likewise, the experience of caring for Felipe during his illness reaffirmed to Rita the importance of empathy and compassion, values she wanted to continue instilling in Gustavo, though her son already demonstrated a remarkable maturity for his age. Rita knew that each of her actions served as an example for him. After Felipe's recovery, the dynamic between him and Rita became even more friendly and collaborative. Felipe's gratitude for the care he had received and the gift of the brooch had marked a new level in their relationship. Rita, for her part, felt increasingly at home in the house, not just as an employee, but as a trusted confidant to Felipe. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly exhausting week preparing for an important meeting at the house, Felipe invited Rita to dinner, not as an employee, but as a guest. "You've worked tirelessly this week, Rita. Let me thank you properly," Felipe said, extending the invitation. Rita accepted, grateful and a little taken aback by the gesture. That evening, she wore a simple yet elegant black dress with the emerald brooch adorning her neck, a symbol of the special relationship she had cultivated with Felipe. The dinner, prepared by a local chef Felipe had hired for the occasion, was a delightful blend of local and international cuisine. During the meal, they talked about various topics, from literature to music and politics. Felipe shared more about his life with his wife and the dreams they had pursued together, some of which had been left behind. Rita, in turn, opened up about her past, her challenges, and the lessons she had learned over the years. The conversation turned to the future, and Felipe expressed his interest in helping Rita achieve any goals she had. "You have so much potential, Rita. If there's anything you believe I can support you with, whether it's education or new opportunities, I'd be happy to do so," Felipe offered, his tone sincere and thoughtful. Rita was deeply touched by the offer. She reflected on her desires and aspirations, recognizing that there were possibilities she had once considered out of reach. "I'd like to explore my interest in business management," she replied. "Maybe taking a few courses," Rita shared thoughtfully. "Set that as a goal, and we'll work together to achieve it," Felipe responded, raising a glass of wine to toast to the future. At the end of the evening, Rita retired to her quarters, feeling inspired and valued. The dinner not only strengthened her relationship with Felipe, but also gave her a new sense of direction and purpose in life. Felipe had gone from being an employer to becoming a mentor and a friend, someone who saw her not just as a housekeeper, but as a person with her own ambitions and dreams. Motivated by Felipe's words and the promise of a future filled with new opportunities, Rita began researching business management courses. Her enthusiasm and determination filled her with renewed energy, something that not only Felipe noticed, but also those around her. One quiet afternoon, while Rita was organizing one of Felipe's guest rooms for a small event scheduled for that week, the serenity of her daily routine was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of a visitor. Roberto, Felipe's son, who lived abroad and rarely visited. Roberto entered the house unannounced, surprising everyone, especially Felipe, who hadn't expected to see his son until the following month. Tall, with an imposing presence and refined manners, Roberto carried the air of someone accustomed to traveling and dealing with important business matters. Upon hearing of Roberto's arrival, Rita hurried to greet him, following Felipe's previous instructions to attend to any family member with the utmost care. When introduced, Rita noticed a curious look in Roberto's eyes, clearly intrigued by the woman who managed his father's household with such confidence. "My father has spoken very highly of you, Rita. I'm glad to finally meet you," Roberto said, extending his hand in a gesture that was friendly but reserved. During Roberto's stay, Rita continued with her responsibilities, now with the additional task of ensuring Roberto's needs were met. Observing the interaction between Rita and his son, Felipe decided to formally introduce them during dinner, highlighting not only Rita's role in taking care of the house, but also her dedication and recent interest in expanding her educational skills. The conversation during dinner became livelier, with Felipe sharing stories from the past and Rita and Roberto exchanging opinions on various topics, ranging from culture to the global economy. Roberto, who had studied economics and managed his own businesses, was impressed by Rita's insights and perspectives. At the end of the dinner, Roberto expressed his desire to speak further with Rita in the coming days, interested in learning more about her positive influence on his father's life. Rita, in turn, felt encouraged by Roberto's genuine interest and the possibility of discussing ideas and future plans with someone of his experience. Roberto's stay extended longer than expected. Day by day, he found reasons to delay his departure. Fascinated not only by the serenity of his father's home and the noticeable improvement in Felipe's mood, thanks to Rita, but also by Rita herself, whose intelligence and warmth drew him in more and more. Rita and Roberto began spending more time together, initially within the context of business and management discussions. However, over time, their conversations shifted to more personal topics. Roberto shared details about his life abroad, the challenges of running his businesses, and his personal aspirations. Rita, in turn, opened up about her past, the challenges she had faced, and her hopes for a better future for herself and her son, Gustavo. One afternoon, while walking through the gardens of the property, the conversation turned to Gustavo's education. Rita expressed her desire to provide Gustavo with the best opportunities possible, an aspiration that deeply resonated with Roberto, who greatly valued education and personal development. "Rita, I could help with that. I have some contacts that could open doors for Gustavo in terms of education. If you're interested, I could make some arrangements," Roberto offered. Rita was surprised and grateful for the offer. "That would be incredible, Roberto. I don't know how to thank you," she responded, her voice tinged with emotion. "There's no need to thank me," Roberto said kindly. "I see potential in you, Rita. Besides, helping you is also a way of thanking you for everything you've done for my father." the relationship between Rita and Roberto continued to grow stronger, based on mutual respect and a deep understanding of each other's aspirations and challenges. Felipe observed with approval as his son and Rita grew closer, pleased to see that his son was finally connecting with someone who shared many of his values. One day, taking advantage of a quiet afternoon, Roberto invited Rita and Gustavo to dinner, an invitation she gladly accepted. During dinner, Gustavo, who was usually shy around strangers, opened up to Roberto, chatting and laughing, clearly feeling at ease with his mother's friend. That night, as they returned home, Rita reflected on the changes in her life since she had arrived at Felipe's house. She never would have imagined forming such a deep connection with someone like Roberto, nor receiving support for her ambitions in ways she had never considered possible. The bond between Rita and Roberto continued to strengthen as they spent more time together, and Roberto's influence in the lives of Rita and Gustavo became increasingly evident. As Gustavo's birthday approached, Rita began planning a small but meaningful celebration, eager to make up for the difficult times they had endured. Roberto, knowing the importance of the event for Rita, offered to help. "Why don't we have the party here at the house? We have plenty of space, and it would be more comfortable for everyone," Roberto suggested one day while they discussed the preparations in the kitchen. Rita, although initially surprised by the offer, accepted with gratitude. She knew that a familiar but special environment would make Gustavo's birthday a memorable occasion. Together, they planned a day filled with games, outdoor activities, and a selection of Gustavo's favorite foods. On the day of the party, Felipe's house was transformed. The gardens were adorned with colorful balloons and banners, game stations, and a small dance floor set up for Gustavo's friends. Rita took charge of the decorations, while Roberto and Felipe supervised the organization and safety of the children. Gustavo, dressed in a new shirt and his favorite shoes, radiated excitement. His eyes sparkled with every new discovery, and his laughter mixed with that of his friends. His happiness was palpable, and whenever he caught his mother's eyes, his smile grew even wider. During the party, Rita had a moment to observe Gustavo interacting with Roberto. Despite not having a consistent father figure in his life, Gustavo showed remarkable openness to Roberto, who played and talked with him effortlessly, much to Rita's surprise. It was clear that Roberto had not only entered her life as a support, but also as a positive figure for her son. As the sun began to set, Roberto approached Rita, who was gathering some used plates. "It looks like Gustavo is having the best birthday," he commented, helping her with the cleanup. Thanks to you," Rita replied, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and affection. "Today was wonderful for Gustavo and for me. I couldn't have asked for a better day." Roberto smiled, their connection stronger than ever. "I'm glad to be a part of it, Rita, and I hope there are many more days like this." That night, after the guests had left and Gustavo had gone to bed, exhausted but happy, Rita and Roberto shared a cup of coffee on the veranda, reflecting on the day. The trust and affection between them had solidified through the shared joy and their commitment to Gustavo's well-being. With the success of Gustavo's birthday and the growing closeness between Rita and Roberto, the atmosphere in Felipe's house was filled with a new sense of family and a shared future. Roberto, who had indefinitely extended his stay, found himself deeply involved in the daily life of the house, supporting Rita not only with organizing events, but also with her educational and personal aspirations. One afternoon, while they were walking through the gardens after a quiet dinner, Roberto decided to open his heart to Rita. They had talked about many things, shared laughter and challenges, but there was still a conversation they had yet to have, one that could define both of their futures. "Rita," Roberto began, stopping by a bench under a centuries-old tree. "These last few months have been some of the happiest of my life. Not only have I found peace here with my father, but something much deeper with you and Gustavo." Rita listened, feeling her heart race with each word. "What I mean to say is, I'd like us to consider something more than just this friendship between us. I'd like us to think about the possibility of a future together, not just as friends or an extended family, but as something more, as partners, Roberto's words hung in the air, filled with emotion and sincerity. Rita, surprised but excited, took a moment to process what she was hearing. Her life had changed so much since arriving at Felipe's house, and now the idea of exploring a new chapter with Roberto filled her mind with possibilities. And yes, a bit of fear. "Roberto, this is big," Rita finally said, her voice trembling but clear. "You mean so much to me, and what you've done for Gustavo and me is more than I could have ever hoped for. But I need to think about it to be sure it's the right decision for Gustavo and me." Roberto nodded, understanding Rita's need for time. "Of course, Rita. I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know how I feel and how serious I am about us." In the days that followed, Rita reflected deeply on Roberto's proposal. She observed the interaction between him and Gustavo, the ease with which they got along, and how Gustavo began to see him as a role model. She also thought about her own heart, about how Roberto had come to occupy a special place in it, offering support and love unconditionally. Finally, one afternoon, Rita sought out Roberto. She found him in the library, absorbed in a book. "Roberto, I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "And if you're willing to take this step with patience and care, then yes, I'd like to see where this path could take us together." Roberto's smile at her words was all Rita needed to know she had made the right decision. United by love and the hope of a shared future, they began planning how to build this new life together. With the decision to explore a future together, Rita and Roberto began to integrate their lives more deeply. Roberto, aware of the significance of this new chapter, wanted to ensure that every aspect of their relationship was approached with respect and care, especially when it came to Gustavo, who was starting to see Roberto as a father figure. However, Rita's newfound happiness didn't go unnoticed, and soon word reached Carlos, who had kept his distance from Rita's life since the divorce. The news that Rita was building a new life with another man stirred a mix of jealousy and regret in Carlos. He decided to confront Rita, driven by confused emotions and a desire to regain some semblance of control or influence over his ex-wife. One afternoon, as Rita and Roberto were discussing details for a small renovation they wanted to make to the house, Carlos appeared unexpectedly. The tension was palpable as Carlos crossed the threshold, his gaze first fixed severely on Roberto and then on Rita. "Rita, we need to talk," Carlos said, trying to mask his insecurity with a facade of authority. Roberto, noticing the tension, offered to give them privacy. But Rita, with the newfound strength in her relationship with Roberto, insisted that he stay. "What you have to say, Carlos, you can say in front of Roberto." Carlos, clearly uncomfortable but too proud to back down, continued. "I've heard you're making plans with this man. It seems like you moved on quickly after us." Rita, holding Carlos's gaze, responded calmly and with determination. "Carlos, what happened between us ended a long time ago. Roberto is part of my life now, and what we have has nothing to do with you." Frustrated by Rita's response and by Roberto's presence, Carlos tried to provoke her. "Do you really think it will be any different with him? Don't you see you're just repeating the same story?" Before Rita could respond, Roberto intervened, his voice firm and controlled. "Carlos, I think you've said enough. Rita has made her choice, and I ask that you respect it. You have no right to come here and question her life or our decisions." Faced with the united front of Rita and Roberto, Carlos finally relented, casting one last look filled with unspoken emotions before turning and leaving. After Carlos's departure, Roberto took Rita's hand, offering her comfort and reassurance. "You don't have to worry about him, Rita. We're in this together." That night, as they reflected on the encounter, Rita felt grateful to have Roberto by her side. The confrontation with Carlos not only reaffirmed her decision to be with Roberto, but also closed a painful chapter of her life, allowing her to look toward the future with hope and determination for the life they were building together. The confrontation with Carlos left Rita reflecting on her past, and how each decision had led to this new chapter of her life. Though the unexpected visit had momentarily shaken her peace, it also strengthened her conviction in the path she had chosen with Roberto. Together, they discussed how they would handle any future disruptions, determined to protect the newfound happiness they had found. The relationship between Roberto and Gustavo also deepened. Roberto had not only become a support for Rita, but also a mentor and father figure for Gustavo, who admired and respected him deeply. This evolution became evident during a meeting at Gustavo's school, which both Roberto and Rita attended. The teachers commented on Gustavo's positive changes, his growing sense of confidence and academic performance, crediting much of this improvement to the stability and support that Roberto provided. Soon after, Carlos attempted a more direct approach to reinsert himself into Gustavo's life, perhaps as a tactic to reconnect with Rita or as a genuine attempt at reconciliation. He requested a meeting with Rita to discuss Gustavo's future, a proposal she accepted cautiously with Roberto's support. In a small cafe far from Felipe's house, Carlos expressed his desire to be more present in Gustavo's life. "I've made many mistakes," he admitted, "but I want to be part of my son's life. I don't want him growing up thinking I didn't care." Rita listened, her initial skepticism softening as she saw Carlos's apparent sincerity. However, she insisted on setting clear conditions. "Gustavo already has a father figure in Roberto, someone who has been consistently present for him," Rita explained. "You can be part of his life, but it has to be in a way that's healthy for Gustavo." Carlos nodded, agreeing to the conditions. Supervised visits were arranged, starting with short meetings in neutral environments to allow Gustavo and Carlos to reconnect in a safe and controlled way. Gustavo, initially cautious, gradually began to open up to his father's presence, closely monitored by Rita and Roberto. The process was slow but progressive. Gustavo learned to balance his affection and respect for Roberto with his father's renewed interest in his life. The strength of their family unit had solidified even further, preparing them for any future challenges. Serenity returned to their lives, allowing them to focus on building an even more stable and love-filled future together. Over time, the relationship between Rita and Roberto deepened further, and Carlos's visits with Gustavo became normalized, creating a more harmonious environment. Inspired by the stability and love now surrounding their family, Roberto decided to take a further step in his commitment to Rita and Gustavo. One autumn evening, as they strolled through the lantern-lit gardens, Roberto stopped in front of an old oak tree, the same one under which he had first expressed his desire for a future together. "Rita," Roberto began, his voice filled with emotion, "since you came into my life, everything has changed for the better. You've not only shown me what true love means, but have enriched every day I spend by your side. I want us to be a family, not just in words, but in every way possible. Will you marry me?" Rita, overwhelmed with emotion and tears in her eyes, nodded eagerly. "Yes, I do. There's nothing I want more in the world." The wedding preparations began with excitement, and Gustavo was as thrilled as the bride and groom. They decided on an intimate ceremony at Felipe's house, which he was delighted to offer as the venue. Close friends and family, including Carlos, who had shown a newfound respect for Rita's decisions and happiness, were invited. On the wedding day, the house was adorned with flowers and elegant drapery, transforming the space into a place of celebration and joy. Rita wore a simple yet elegant dress, accompanied by Gustavo, who had the honor of carrying the rings. Felipe, visibly emotional, took Rita's arm to walk her down the aisle, where Roberto waited, a picture of pride and love. The ceremony was a reflection of their lives, sincere, emotional, and filled with hope for the future. The vows they exchanged were promises of support, respect, and unconditional love, not just between them, but also toward Gustavo, who beamed with joy at the formalization of his new family. After the ceremony, as guests enjoyed an outdoor feast, Roberto took a moment to thank everyone for their support. "This celebration is not just about the union of Rita and me, but the beginning of a new chapter for all three of us. Thank you for being part of this moment, for supporting us, and for sharing in our happiness. The evening ended with music and dancing, and as Rita and Roberto shared their first dance as a married couple, the sense of completeness was palpable. Gustavo, running among the guests with contagious laughter, symbolized the promise of happy and peaceful days ahead. Years after the wedding, the lives of Rita, Roberto, and Gustavo flourished in ways none of them could have imagined on that day beneath the old oak tree. Felipe's house, now their permanent home, had witnessed many other moments of joy and celebration, including Gustavo's birthdays and the births of his two younger sisters, Luisa and Sofia. Roberto and Rita worked together not only to maintain, but to expand Roberto's businesses, utilizing the skills Rita had refined in her business management studies. Their professional collaboration further strengthened their personal relationship, establishing a model of mutual respect and support that permeated all aspects of their family life. Gustavo, now a bright and responsible teenager, embraced his role as the eldest brother with enthusiasm and care, guiding Luisa and Sofia through their garden adventures and helping them with their schoolwork. Roberto's influence as a father figure and mentor was a crucial factor in Gustavo's development, and their relationship was a testament to the love and dedication Roberto had shown from the beginning. One particularly sunny day, as the family enjoyed a picnic at their favorite beach, Rita reflected on the journey they had taken. As she watched Roberto build sandcastles with the children and Gustavo teach his sisters how to collect seashells, she was overcome with a deep sense of gratitude. "Is everything okay, my love?" Roberto asked, noticing her thoughtful gaze. Rita smiled and nodded. "I'm more than okay. I was just thinking about everything we've been through, how each challenge brought us to this moment. I wouldn't change anything about our journey together." Roberto joined her, wrapping his arms around her gently. "Neither would I. These years with you and the kids have been the best of my life." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family gathered to watch the spectacle. Gustavo, holding one of his little sisters on his shoulders, Luisa running with a butterfly net, and Sofia clutching Rita's hand, all shared laughter and stories from the day. This simple but profoundly meaningful moment was a reflection of the peace and happiness that Rita had sought all her life. Through adversity, she had found a love that transcended time and circumstance, forming a family that was her true home. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rita, Roberto, and their children continued to weave the story of their life together, a story of love, resilience, and hope, confident that whatever the future held, they would face it together with full hearts and hands intertwined.